Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 3 and the final part of my Winter Barn series. And in this video we're going to go ahead and add the final touches to the barn and the snow. The app that I'm going to be using is Infinite Painter for Android. And if you want to follow along with traditional materials, check out part 1 in this series where I have a list of all the paint, brushes, and the canvas that I use. And so here I want to go ahead and add the final highlights to the barn, the snow on the barn. And I'm using the same mixture that I used to highlight the snow on the ground, which would be, if you're following along traditionally, some cadmium orange and white acrylic gesso, and you would just add a tiny tint of orange to the white acrylic gesso because a little goes a long way. And so I'm just adding the final edges, the highlights to the edges on the barn. We don't want to cover up all the dark snow that's underneath it because we want it to show the shadows and all the lumps that snow gets when it sits on top of objects. So we want to go ahead and keep that, and just kind of keep the edges of your snow really soft and rounded. And I'm adding a little bit of highlight to the edges of the old dead trees, or not dead, they're just lost their leaves, but the old trees behind the barn. And also I want to go ahead and just add a little bit of some darker snow underneath them to kind of give a little bit of a shadow. And then we want to go ahead and sort of work on the barn a little bit. I want to straighten the doors just a little bit more, straighten the windows just a tad, just kind of get the edges a little bit straighter, but you don't have to make the windows and the doors a solid black. You want to kind of leave variations of color there so that it looks like the light's hitting wood or it's shining inside the barn there. And then I want to go ahead and sort of straighten the boards around the windows and the doors, just kind of make them look a little bit straighter. But since this is an old barn, it doesn't matter if they're a little bit crooked. In fact, it kind of gives it character. You want to go ahead and kind of let it look a little bit rough and weathered. And I'm adding just a tiny little bit more of highlights on the barn and to the icicles, the snow on the barn. And remember to keep the edges of your barn parallel on the roof there. And I wanted to add a distant fence in the background behind the barn, but I wanted it to look like it was quite a ways out from the barn, so I just used a light blue color, and you can use ultramarine blue with burnt sienna and a lot of white if you're following along with your acrylics. And I just wanted to add just a suggestion of a fence way out there, but keep it light because we want things in the background need to be lighter than things that are in the foreground, and that just makes your perspective of your picture when you make things lighter in the background. And then I wanted to add a little bit more highlight to the barn, so I'm taking a lighter red there and using old oil or flat oil in Infinite Painter. And that just gives it kind of a weathered wood look. And you can use your number 6 flat brush if you're following along traditionally, and add cadmium red with a lot of white acrylic gesso and smudge it in on your barn. You don't want to kill all the dark color underneath. You want it to show through because, again, we're trying to show an old weathered wood look on the barn there, and maybe the paint's starting to fade in the front where the sunlight hits it all the time. And so you want to go ahead and just kind of smudge that in. And you can use your finger or a paper towel if you're following along traditionally. And Infinite Painter, I'm using the Schoolhouse chalk brush. And then I wanted to go ahead and sign the painting. But as you know, and as I've said before, that doesn't mean that I'm through just because I signed it, but I went ahead and signed it. And then I wanted to go ahead and just darken the pathway to the barn just a little bit more. So I took a little bit of some darker blue and just made kind of a broken line towards the barn, like somebody had walked through the snow a little bit and smudged it out there. And then I decided that that probably was all that I needed to do. So this is the end of my Winter Barn series. And everybody stay tuned for a brand new series coming soon. And hit the subscribe button if you want to see what it is. And thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below. And if you have any suggestions about what you would like to see, just go ahead and leave those in the comments too. And I will catch you later.